News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Wednesday. And I'm going to invite you, as always, to join in the conversation. That's one thing that makes this show so great. We don't just sit here and talk at you. We can talk with you, and you're invited to call in. We'll get the number up there in just a moment. And this morning, it's our monthly topic that we do, among others that we do as well. But interesting one. We're talking medical malpractice this morning. Questions for you to ask should you have, concerns about how things went for you at a hospital, how things went with you with the doctor, whether or not you possibly have a claim. If you're sitting there watching and you don't think you do, but you know someone else who might be at home wondering about why that wound won't heal or whatever, we'll get into that this morning. We'll talk about what's happening nationwide with regard to these types of medical malpractice lawsuits with our guest. You know him, you love him. He's here every month. He's been with me for years, actually, as a matter of fact. Clint Kelly, good morning to you, sir.
How you doing? Yeah.
It's good to have you on. I've been doing this for a while. I've learned an awful lot.
You've become an expert, actually.
Well, sometimes you scare me. Yeah. And what I mean by that is some of the stories and cases you've had to deal with malpractice.
It's true. And I will tell you, you know more about medical malpractice screening than I would say 90% of the lawyers out there, because you've done it long enough. You know what to look for and how to evaluate on the front end.
It's thanks to you. I'm telling you, my wife always asks me questions about it. She goes, well, what did Clint say about this? Or what, and it's true. And there's a lot and that's one reason it's worth doing this show is, and let's remind folks again, as you join us just at the beginning, because we get new viewers every time you come on.
Right.
Malpractice. Give us the definition of that and how someone knows whether or not they may have a claim.
Yeah, malpractice is a major medical mistake that produces a major injury, paralysis, amputation, death, loss of an organ, any injury that can seriously compromise the ability to earn a living or rack up serious medical expenses. They have to be serious major injuries, Nick, or they're not worth pursuing, simply because the way the system's geared right now, hospitals and doctors won't pay for temporary injuries or minor injuries, and juries won't compensate. So they need to be serious.
Okay, and it can be expensive to litigate,
yes.
right? You need to deal with experts and all of that, but not all of your cases go to trial.
Correct. Most do settle, and part of that is because I try to select cases that I can settle. Also because of the fact that I'd like to think because my skill and expertise in handling these cases makes it more likely for defendants to want to sit down and discuss resolving the case so that my client can get financial compensation and move on.
And that's all you do?
Correct.
Malpractice. Okay,
Correct.
There's lawyers out there that general practice that will say they can do malpractice, which is fine, but you specialize in that.
Correct. I'm board certified in medical malpractice law. There's not very many of us across the state. We have to take a verbal, oral examination, written examination. We have to have a certain number of jury trials that we've completed, and then we have to have references from other board certified malpractice lawyers to get specialized, and so that's one of the things that separates me from other lawyers.
On this very show, we've had folks call in who have described what sounds like, yeah, they may have had a case. And then we get to the crucial question. I'm going to say this always, when did it happen?
Yeah.
And statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations is 1 year from the date that the patient discovers or should have discovered that they were injured. That 1 year is extremely tight. So people who sit and wait for a few months thinking they're going to get better, or thinking that they aren't comfortable about suing their doctor, wait a year and a half and then call me up and I have to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't take your case. And so, like we tell everyone, if you think you've been injured seriously by a medical mistake, just pick up the phone and call. The consultation is free, it's confidential, and that way you have your chance to get your day in court.
And by the way, that's the way it's set up under Tennessee law. It may vary from state to state. But have you encountered situations where there have been physicians that maybe worry about that and know very much about the statute of limitations? The patient doesn't. They say, well, just wait, it'll get better. Just wait, it'll get better. Putting it off, knowing that if they can wait that year, they're free and clear?
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Yes, Nick, no question it happens. It still happens. I've got a case right now with a patient who was put off by the physician over and over and over again, basically trying to get this patient to wait over a year before the doctor was going to say, I'm sorry, but my mistake is not going to heal. It's going to be permanent. It's unfortunate. There are a small number of doctors that do that intentionally because they don't want to get sued, or if they do get sued, they want to be able to get the case dismissed.
Right. It's standard of care. All right, listen, I want to ask you, I've got some things I'm going to bring up, but anything specific you wanted to bring up? Every once in a while there's a case in the news somewhere in the country that catches your eye, or some development in the law. Anything you want to throw out there?
Yeah, you know, Nick, we've been talking about this for months, and I guess this is just going to keep going on, and my prediction was true. You know, I told you that there are going to be more and more cases of what we call medical battery. That's operating on the wrong body part or operating on the wrong patient, because the volume of work that doctors and hospitals are taking on is reducing the margin of error. And so shortcuts inevitably happen in those situations. There is in the Bradenton Herald, there was a case out of Florida where the Florida Board of Medicine fined a surgeon because the surgeon removed a kidney that he thought was a tumor. And
a kidney that had a tumor on it, or he thought the kidney was a tumor?
He thought the kidney was a tumor.
What doctor doesn't know the difference between a kidney and a tumor?
Correct. Well, he was consented to remove a tumor, and instead went in and removed the kidney. Now, there are two different things that are major foul-ups in that. The first foul-up is removing the wrong body part when you're consented to remove a tumor. Clearly that's medical battery. That patient didn't consent to having his kidney removed. The second major mistake is, how does a competent surgeon mistake a kidney for a tumor if he's watching what he's doing?
It's mind-boggling.
So
the tumor's shaped like a kidney.
Well, and it begs the third question, and I don't know this. I'm just speculating. This would be my opinion from looking at this. But when you've got a mistake that profound, it makes you wonder if the physician was impaired. It's just so out of the ballpark. It's like, I'm going to fly to Paris and I wind up in Moscow. It's just the difference between the two is so amazing that you wouldn't think any reasonably prudent doctor, even if they were careless, would make that kind of serious mistake. But these things are going to continue to happen, unfortunately, in the system the way it's geared right now, because of the sheer volume of patients and the fairly limited number of doctors or surgeons in particular who are having to perform these procedures to keep their income up and to keep the hospital's income up.
Right. I know it comes down to dollars and cents in the end, but how much is a human kidney worth? A healthy human kidney? In other words, is he going to bankrupt this hospital and the doctor? I mean, I can't imagine. If I'm on that jury and someone took out a healthy kidney of mine, I mean, wow, can you put a value on a kidney?
Well, let me ask you this. I'm glad you raised that point. Should this patient be able to bankrupt the doctor or perhaps the hospital because of this?
Well,
I'm just asking you for your opinion.
Okay, my opinion on this. I want the patient compensated in some way to help address what it is, and that's why I was asking the money. I don't want a hospital to be, I mean, mistakes happen, and I guess I would want to know more exactly why this happened. If he was impaired, I think that doctor should be done as a doctor for sure, if it means breaking him personally. As for the hospital, should they have been more aware of this doctor's issue? So it depends on the culpability, and if they were completely, yeah, I have no problem with breaking him and putting him out of business if they were almost criminal, you know, but on the other hand, circumstances can be different. Why do you ask that question?
Well, but there's one other question I want to ask you. Suppose the hospital had evidence in the past that this guy was impaired but continued to allow him to practice on the premises. In that situation, would you break the hospital?
Well, I don't know. In terms of break, or what do you mean, just go after as much money as possible, or shut them down?
Enter a judgment as a jury that would be so high,
like $100 million.
That the hospital, the hospital would have great difficulty paying it, or would run out all their insurance.
And that they knew and ignored it and put you at risk for that. I guess if I'm the victim, I'd want, my background on this is, are there other people in the hospital that had nothing to do with this that are going to suffer? And that would be part of my concern, just thinking, what does that mean for other people there? But they need to feel the pain, is my point, so they address this and it never happens again. You know, the punishment's one thing, but you've always said this, Nick, the important thing with these big judgments is it gets their attention so they make changes so it doesn't happen again. Unfortunately, one person's been hurt. I want it to stop moving forward. What do you think? Is that a bad answer?
No, it's actually exactly what juries do. Juries don't break doctors. Juries don't break hospitals. You don't see gigantic verdicts that put a hospital's business model in peril. It's amazing. I mean, you can see some of the most almost corrupt behavior by a physician or a hospital, and yet juries have that tendency to make that sort of analysis that you made to say, we're going to send a message, but we're not going to put people out of business. We're not going to imperil other healthcare workers who work there. That's why in these particular cases, when you hear the word there's a malpractice crisis, it's absolute BS. Juries just simply favor doctors and hospitals, give them the benefit of the doubt, and if there is wrongdoing, they tend to be very, very conservative in how they compensate.
That's
because of all the reasons you mentioned. That's why I wanted to hear what you thought.
Right, and
because you're talking like typical jurors would.
But I hope what I said was grounded in some degree of logic. You know, I'm not sure if you necessarily agree with it all, but look, I still figure, you know, we can still get several $1 million for the client, and there's all this negative publicity. People are going to see it. The hospital's still getting a shot to the jaw. And again, I do have my wiggle room. If it raises the level of something, in some of these cases you've described to me, in my opinion, border on criminal. It's not a civil issue. It's border on criminal. And, well, for instance, and it's not really malpractice, as we go to the break, that case in Phoenix, Arizona, where that poor unconscious woman was impregnated by one of the staffers, who, by the way, is, since you've been on, it's come forward. He was caught through DNA testing. That's criminal.
That's rape.
Yeah. That's great. And as far as I'm concerned, he's going to jail, and I don't know what, you know, that president of that company's had to resign. And
the doctors that were in charge of the patient had to leave too.
Yeah, so.
Because, you know, that begs the question, how does a woman continue to go through a process of pregnancy and no one notices until the baby is already halfway out of the vagina? That's how they found out that she was pregnant.
No one was paying attention to this poor woman.
That's amazing to me.
And I don't know if family members visited or what. Maybe I'm guessing she might have been a larger woman, but there's no excuse for that.
In my judgment, that's a place that gets put out of business.
I gotcha.
Whether it's a jury, healthcare board, that place has no business operating assisted living. There are other places that can do that job. That is a dangerous place to let something like that happen.
Point taken. Listen, let's take a break on that. When we come back, more of our conversation as well as your phone calls. We've got some coming in already. The number 737-7587. Questions or comments for malpractice attorney Clint Kelly coming up right after this.